Brilliant. Morning, everyone. How are we doing? Wow. Okay. Mixed. Awesome. Today we are continuing our series in Mark. We're going to be in Mark 14. I'm just going to pray for us before we get into that. And then I think we're going to be joined on live stream by Cafe Church here at Aberdeen Central and Aberdeen North. So why don't we just pray? Jesus, we just thank you for, Lord, the fact that we have this book, we have the Bible, your word to us, Lord. And this morning, God, our heart is to lean into you and to hear everything it is that you want to say to us. And so we just pray, God, that your voice would be heard this morning. Lord, that you would speak loudly and clearly to us, Lord, and we would listen. We love you, God, and we want to be changed by you this morning. Amen. Fantastic. So, as I said, we're in Mark 14 this morning. Ali, do I need to do a little bit of a Oh, we're good. Hello, Cafe Church. Thank you for joining us. We're in Mark 14 this morning, verse 53 to 65. And just to kick us off, I want to ask a bit of a question. I wonder if you've ever had a moment where you've made a decision that seems right at the time, but pretty quickly there's consequences. Pretty quickly you realize there's no way of going back, and you realize that if you want a Bible, what you need to do is put your hand in the air and it'll be delivered to you. I wove that in really smoothly. But you have these moments where you make a decision and all of a sudden everything goes wrong. You've done something and it spirals out of your control. Maybe you're somebody who's into a bit of DIY. Now, a while ago we had a little plumbing issue and I thought, I can handle this. This will be fine. So a quick Google search, like, that seems easy enough. I know what I'm doing. Got the tools out. 90 minutes later, covered in water. No way of stopping it. It was a bad moment. I did not have a good handle on that situation. If you don't relate to DIY, maybe another decision that you've made that has kind of went out of your control could be you're having a meal. You're having a delicious meal. Have the starters and the mains, and you're full. You're absolutely bursting. But dessert is on its way, and you think there's always a little room for dessert. I remember me and Hazel and I went for dinner at a restaurant, a Turkish restaurant, and we had a set menu, and they do this thing where they have like hundreds of little courses, and we were just getting absolutely stuffed. There was one left, the dessert course, and I was like, really, I was fit to bursting, but I was like, I've paid for this. I'm not going to say no. Like, I've paid for this. I'm going to have it. And they brought out, have you ever seen baklavas? They're like tiny little square pastries. And I thought, easy, not a problem. This is the perfect dessert to finish it off. Oh my word, the sweetest thing it was like 5 sugar cubes packed into one little thing like that. And as I ate it and all this sugar was coursing through my body, the thought that was going through my head was, this is how I die. It was so intense. I was just like, oh my word, what have I done? And I waddled to the car afterwards and was just like, oh my word, I'm going to pay for this. Had to fast for the next 3 days to ride that out. But we've all probably been there where there's moments where we feel like we have a good plan, we make a decision, and yet it spirals out of our control, and there's no matter what we do, we can't pull it back. And today what we're reading about is this moment where Jesus is arrested by the religious leaders, the chief priests and teachers and elders of his day. They have been plotting to take Jesus out. They see him as someone that they need to eliminate, someone who has a dangerous message that they need to silence. And they don't realize it, but actually by sentencing Jesus, by putting him on the cross, they're not silencing him. They're not scattering his followers, but they're setting off this chain of events that's going to go beyond their control, that's going to lead to Jesus rising from the dead, the truth of he is getting out, and the gospel spreading across the known world, exactly what they don't want to happen. So it's this moment of it going, out of their control, and they don't realize that's what's about to happen. So we're going to read about this moment where Jesus is arrested and he's put on trial. Up to this point in Mark's gospel, Jesus has been really secretive about who he really is in public. He's not allowed anyone to say the truth of who he is until this moment where he reveals that he is the Son of God. He reveals exactly who he is. So Jesus has been praying in the garden just before this bit that we're reading today. Judas has come with a band of men to arrest him. He's betrayed, and the rest of the disciples scatter. And this is the moment where he's bound to the high priest and his followers to stand trial. So we're going to read Mark 14, 53 to 65. They took Jesus to the high priest and all of the chief priests. The elders and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another not made with hands. Yet even their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? I am, said Jesus. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, prophesy. And the guards took him and beat him. This is the moment where the king is finally revealed to these religious leaders. When Jesus responds to the high priest and he declares who he is revealed in this moment. So this morning we want to ask, what do we see of who he is? Who is this king? What kind of king is he? And we're going to look at two things this morning. The first thing we're going to see is that he is a king that holds all the power. About 6 years ago, I was doing an internship with church called DNA. It was like a leadership development, discipleship kind of year. It was a fantastic year, and as part of it, you got to do a missions trip. You got to go abroad somewhere, and I got to go to Norway. Lucky me, right? It's a good location. So land in Norway. I'm very, very excited. We get picked up by our host, and as we're driving through, there's lots of water everywhere. More so than normal because there had been flooding, like really, really intense flooding over the last wee while. So we're driving through, and the host is just like kind of chatting away to us, and he says, we've got something pretty special planned for tomorrow. And I'm thinking, brilliant, Norway, what are we going? What are we going to do? Is it fjords? Is it mount? I don't know. My knowledge of Norway is pretty low. But, what is it going to be? This is really exciting. And he goes, well, tomorrow we're going to visit the dam. And I thought, oh, I was really, really disappointed. I was like, of all the things I could have seen in Norway, and we're going to see the dam. Fantastic. So ungrateful. Do you ever just look back at yourself and just think, lucky you were in Norway, just do whatever. Anyway, but I was just like, I could see a dam anywhere. Why are we doing this? But he was really excited about it. He was like, you're going to love this. We get up in that morning, and it's dam day, and he's like, come on, guys, get ready. We're going to go and see the dam. I'm just like, yeah, great. And we get in the car. Whole time I'm just thinking, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? We're getting closer and closer to the dam, and there's this sound. It's like a low rumble almost. I kind of think, is there something wrong with the car here? What's going on? But it's just this low rumble in the background. And as we get nearer and nearer to the dam, it starts getting louder and louder. There's a kind of noise. I'm like, what is going on? As we park at the dam and we open the door, the volume just shoots up. It's this really, really loud noise. And we walk up to the dam, and it is crazy. Millions and millions of tons of water per second, I don't know the statistics, but I'm guessing, are just pouring through this dam. It's just absolutely crazy. And honestly, the noise is deafening. It's just this raw elemental power. And their host is there shouting facts about the dam. There's this dam was built in. I can't hear a word he's saying. I'm just like, this is amazing. I love dams. It's absolutely having a fantastic time. Honestly, and if anyone ever wants to take me to a dam, I'm well up for it. Please speak to me after the service. But driving, initially I wasn't excited by it because we were driving past all of that still water, and I just thought, okay, we're going to open the dam, and it's going to go from this place to this place, and that'll be it. It's not much that's exciting here. The water seemed flat, serene, completely still. But as soon as that dam opened, the power that was there was so obvious. This is a picture of Jesus in this moment. You know, on the surface, it looks like he has no power. He looks incredibly weak in this position. He's been bound and beaten by his enemies, his closest friends who've spent practically every day of the last 3 years, who have sworn undying loyalty to him. They've all scattered. They've all left him on his own. Jesus is stood here alone in the grip of the authorities, who are desperate to get rid of him and bring him down in any way they can. What words might we use to describe Jesus' situation here? Powerful is probably not one that seems to fit. The religious leaders, they think they've got the upper hand here, but what they don't realize is actually, by their actions, they are fulfilling the plans and purposes of Jesus in this moment. He is the one who is actually in charge. Everything that has happened to him up to this point and the punishment that he is going forward to endure on the cross only happens because he allows it to happen. When we're talking about power, Jesus shows immense power and strength of character by allowing himself to be subjected to all of this when he can actually escape at any point. In every previous clash with these religious leaders, where they've tried to trap him, when they've tried to get him to say things that would incriminate him, Jesus has just run rings around these guys. Like, they can't trap him. He could easily have defended himself in this moment with all this stuff coming at him that just isn't true. But he doesn't do that, does he? He remains silent. He takes the slander and the abuse and the lies. He says in Matthew, when he's getting arrested, he said, I could call on legions of angels from heaven to come and rescue me and set me free in this moment, but I'm not going to do that. He takes all of this punishment on himself. He takes all of this slander. Whilst all these wild accusations are being hurled around him and, this madness is just going on in the room, Jesus is silent. He's stood calm in the center of it all. And I think that's a picture of who is really in control in this moment. All this frenzy going on around, and Jesus is at the center of it all, completely still. He is holding the power, allowing this stuff to happen to him. John 10:17, Jesus says this. He says, I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the authority to lay it down and the authority to take it up again. Wow. Let's not miss what's happening here. Jesus in this moment is willingly, courageously walking towards his own death. They don't have the power to take his life from him. Only he can lay it down. This is highlighted by the fact where the high priest, who is getting nowhere in this trial, is not going to plan at all with all this contradicting evidence. He's forced to do something desperate, and he asks Jesus directly, are you the Messiah? And he's hoping that Jesus is going to incriminate himself in that moment. And he can't believe his luck because Jesus sentences himself. He seals his own fate when he says who he is. His power is not only shown in his restraint or how in control he is of the situation, but Jesus goes on further than that when he talks about who he is. He says something really interesting. He answers that question of, are you the Messiah, by saying that he is, and they will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, for us, we might not immediately get the significance of that. But you can bet that every single person who was in that room with Jesus in that moment would have known exactly what he was talking about. Because what Jesus was doing was he was referencing a couple of scriptures that were prophecies about who the Messiah was going to be. And so when he says this thing about coming on the clouds of heaven, he's referencing a part in Daniel 7 where Daniel has a vision of who the Messiah is going to be. And if we just read this, stay with me, if we just read this, it's really interesting. Daniel says this about who Jesus is going to be. In my vision, I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven, which is what Jesus said. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and people of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting one that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. And it's like, boom. This is what Jesus says in that moment. He's like, this is who I am. This is the power that I have. And he is announcing that to the room by referencing that scripture in that moment. Immediately, they all know what he's saying. Not only is he in control of what is going on around, and he has the balance of power in his hand, he is saying, I am the Son of God. I will sit at the right hand of God, and all glory, authority, and sovereign power is with me. The power that is needed to rule this universe is in my hands. That's what Jesus is saying. That's what he's revealing about who he is. That same Jesus who has that power, who rules the galaxy and holds it together. It's like this dam that could burst forth with unlimited power at any moment. Jesus is not powerless here, even if it seems like it. But instead, he is using the unlimited power at his disposal, not to punish those people around him, but to take punishment on himself, to save other people. Isn't that amazing? That's who our God is. This God with unlimited resources and power doesn't do it for his own ends, but he does it to take punishment on himself so that we can be saved. That's flipping good, guys. I don't know if you realize that, but that's good news. Did anyone see last year France's Spider-Man? Does anybody remember this? So this was a guy, probably going to mispronounce his name, so apologies, but he was a migrant from Mali called Mamadou Gassama. He was on his way to watch a football game in Paris, and then he sees this big crowd of people by a big block of apartments, and they're all like just freaking out, really distressed. And he sees what's going on because he looks up, and there's this 4-year-old boy hanging from a 4th-story balcony window, just hanging like that. And everyone's just like, oh my word, like this, no one does anything. But in that moment, this guy springs into action. And in under a minute, he scaled the side of this building and just grabs the boy and pulls him to safety. If you've not seen it, YouTube it when you get home. It's brilliant. But what is really good about that is that this guy was like an unlikely candidate for that. He wasn't like a French citizen. He was there illegally and, just seemed like an unlikely candidate. But in that moment, he was the only one who had the power to save that boy. He was the only one who was able to come and do that. And in the same way, Jesus stands alone in this moment. Only he has the power in his hands to come through for us and save us. And so when we're looking at this picture of Jesus not being powerless but powerful, we need to not forget that that is who he is. We need to not forget that Jesus is the one who holds all the power. How often do we feel powerless in our lives? How often are there situations that we face where we just feel like we are not in control and there's nothing we can do? Whether that's sin in our lives that we feel has the upper hand, or when we face illness, relationship breakdown, job loss, whatever it is. Yet we serve a God who has the power. In the middle of the storm, he is still God in control. He's still the one with the power to save. There's a really sweet part in Isaiah where it says, those who hope in the Lord, those who trust in him, those who depend on him, will renew their strength, soar on wings like eagles, run and not grow weary, walk and not be faint. In other words, there's this sense of when we rely on God, when we trust in him, we will be carried, that he will be with us, and his power will take us through situations. We need to remember this morning that that is the God that we serve. The one who has power in his hand and who wants to come alongside us and lift us up. And so are we leaning on him? Are we relying on his power this morning in those difficult times? And the last thing we're going to talk about is that he's a king who establishes a new order. Hazel and I have been in our house that we're in the minute. Sorry, I need a drink. Reset. Okay. Hazel and I have been living in the house that we're in for about 3 years. And I remember first moving in, lots of things we wanted to change. It was a very strong 70s, 80s vibe in the house. Lots of floral wallpaper. Nothing wrong with floral wallpaper. I know it's probably very fashionable right now. I'm just personally not a fan. But lots of things we kind of walked in and we're like, oh, I need to change this. And we're wandering around and unpacking bits and pieces over the first couple of days. And I remember one of the first things that I noticed was coming into the kitchen. On the wall, there was this little tiny 99p clock. You know those little tiny plastic clocks you get, the little cheap ones from Poundland and stuff. Nothing wrong with them. Bargain. I'd go for that. But this was clear that this was one of those clocks that had been there for a long time. Do you know how, like, in your kitchen on the very top of the cabinets, you get that kind of layer of, like, grease and kind of dust and stuff? I'm possibly revealing a bit too much about our kitchen right now. But do you know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of like, you just run your hand on it and you wish you hadn't. So this clock, at the top of it, had that kind of greasy, dusty layer on it. And it's like, if you moved it, you could see like the kind of imprint on the wall. And it's like, this guy's been here for too long. And I thought, it's a cheap clock. I don't mind taking it off. And we had a new clock, brand new one, good to go. So it was like, perfect, let's do that. So swap the clocks, chuck the old one away. A couple of days later, the previous owner who was in that house was coming around to pick something up he'd forgotten. And we're just chatting away. It was very friendly. How are you settling in? All that kind of stuff. And we walk through to the kitchen, and he walks past the wall and just snaps to it like that. And he's looking at the wall where the clock used to be. And then he looks at me and he goes, so you got rid of the clock then? And then just leaves a massive pause like that. And I was just like, deeply, deeply uncomfortable moment. I was like, yeah, just thought it'd be good for a change. Okay, bye. And then we just, he goes off and the conversation kind of dwindles and he leaves. And I'm left feeling really bad. I'm like, maybe I should have waited before replacing the clock. Maybe that was insensitive. That was too soon. And then after a while, I was like, hang on. I live here now. This is my house. And like, if he's getting upset about a 99p clock getting changed, like, we're going to change a lot of things here. That floral wallpaper is going to go. Like, he cannot be upset about this. There comes a time when it's obvious that it's time for a change. There's signs, there's things where you think, you know what, this thing has to go. This old thing has been here for too long, and a new thing has to come in. And the religious leaders who've ruled, they've ruled the people in this way that has been offensive to God. Jesus at one point accuses them of being like whitewashed tombs. That's what he says. It's like, you look great on the outside, you look all clean and stuff, but on the inside, it's corruption and it's rottenness. They lived their lives by the law, which sounds like a good thing, by God's law. But what they were doing was they were inventing more and more laws to add on top of the laws that were already there. These extra rules they demanded people had to follow to please God. They created all these religious hoops for people to jump through, while their own lives were far from perfect. And often it was the weak, poor, and vulnerable who would be the ones who would miss out. They were experts in obeying the law and in the minute details of it, whilst completely missing the heart of it. They wanted to hang on to their way of doing things, onto the past and their authority. And Jesus was a threat to that. And the crazy thing is, for these people who were so fixated on the law and so fixated on doing everything completely right, not making any errors, to bring Jesus down, they end up breaking all of their own rules to do it. So a trial like this wasn't supposed to happen at night, and yet it does. It was supposed to be very public, and yet it's secret. It's in the high priest's house in the dead of night. It wasn't supposed to happen around a Jewish festival, but it's Passover. It wasn't supposed to happen before the Sabbath. It is. The accused was supposed to have a defense. He doesn't. If the sentence was death, there was supposed to be a full day afterwards where the rulers would sit and consider, is this the right thing to do? They would pray, they would fast, they would wait for new evidence to come to light. And yet, they sentence Jesus and fast-track him to the cross as quickly as they can. The fact that they blindfolded, spat on, and beat Jesus is shocking. And we can read that and just think, oh, maybe court was like that back in the day. It's literally as shocking as if you were in court today and then the judge sentences someone and then goes, put a bag over his head and just start beating him in front of the jury. Like, you would be like, what is going on? This is chaos. It's literally as shocking what is happening. I mean, can you imagine that today? One of the most shocking things as well that happened was the witnesses that gathered to give these false testimonies about Jesus. If false testimony was so serious, if you were found to lie in court, you basically got the same punishment as the accused. And so what they should have done in that moment was sentence all of those witnesses to death. But they don't do it. They just want to trap Jesus. in this moment, what you're actually getting a picture of is this system that these guys have built, this legalism, which leans completely on doing everything right, is coming apart at the seams. You see this old clock with grease and dust on it that's been there for too long, and it's time for it to come off the wall. Even the lies that they throw at him don't stick. Even with an unfair trial with loaded dice, they can't convict Jesus because he can stand up to scrutiny, which is amazing. But the amazing thing is that you have this legalistic system that they've created, which is just toxic. And for so many Jewish people would just be killing their relationship with God and causing them to live under guilt and shame. And Jesus is just standing there, and it's just coming unstuck around him. This system is just starting to collapse in on himself. Caiaphas, the high priest, can see the question isn't getting anywhere, that the false testimony isn't working, and so he has to get Jesus to incriminate himself. And this is the moment where Caiaphas is really careful not to say the name of God. He says, the Blessed One. You don't say the name of God. He says, are you the Messiah? And Jesus answers, I am. Which, if going back to the Old Testament, that was the name of God that Moses was given. I am. And then something very significant happens immediately after this moment, where Jesus announces who he is. The high priest tears his robe. And he did this because it was a sign of horror and despair. That's what you would do back then. And he was also kind of saying that because he believed Jesus had blasphemed, he was doing it as shock, and it was like a judgment thing. But I think this tearing actually has echoes of what is going to happen later in the story when Jesus goes to the cross. And there's this moment where the curtain that's in the temple that separates everyone from the most holy place where God's presence is, where it's ripped. And in that moment where it's ripped from top to bottom, it's like God's Spirit is not confined to this temple anymore. It's not confined to the high priest who can only come on a certain day of the year and all this kind of stuff. But actually, this gap between us and God, is gone, which is amazing. The old order has passed away. The high priest's robe was something that is described in great detail. It's very kind of, There's accounts in the Old Testament that kind of talk about how it's made and stuff. But it carries, it's a symbol of the high priest's authority. It's a symbol of his office. It's kind of really important that only he can wear this. This is a really big thing. And the fact that he's ripping this thing, and he's doing this to pronounce judgment on Jesus. But actually what he's doing in that moment as he rips it, he's pronouncing judgment on himself. He's declaring himself as unworthy to hold that office. And he's declaring the old order and the old way of things as that's something of the past. That needs to go. And without even realizing it, he's just making way for Jesus to come in as the new high priest, the one who's going to intercede between God and us, and a way is made. Isn't that amazing? And you know what's really lovely about this whole thing? Jesus just stands there and just announces who he is. He just declares who he is. And then it's like, because of that, God's presence can come in. The old is pushed to the side, and God is there. How amazing is that? This legalism, this system of earning God's favor, steps to one side for Jesus, who intercedes on our behalf and pays a price so that we can know freedom. We actually live in the aftermath of that moment. We don't have a relationship with God that's based on good deeds that is earned. It is a free gift. And I want to ask us this morning, are we living in that freedom? We've been made a new creation in Jesus. The Bible tells about our old sinful self being put into death and our old master, sin, not being our master anymore. But I just wonder whether in our lives, whether there are old clocks that still stay there, that have been there for too long and that actually should be removed, that we're hanging on to. I think what Jesus would want to say to us this morning is it's time for the old to be cleared out and for the new master of the house to have his way. Jesus has established a new order where we're set free from the demands of legalism and earning God's favor, and instead we live in the reality of his grace. We can't earn his love, but life with him is given freely to everyone who puts their trust in him. And so I want to encourage us today, don't live in the old, live in the new. Don't go for the old wineskins, but be filled with new wine from Jesus. So this is the moment where the king is revealed, where he declares who he is. And by doing that, he shows that he holds all of the power. And he establishes a new order of grace. Why don't we stand?